I was just setting out my broken shop V on the curb for bulk trash pickup when I heard the distinctive click-clack of designer heels on pavement. Margaret Peaton, our HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood overseer, was making her morning rounds. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the ancient yellow machine sitting there with its cracked hose and ducted taped body. Her eyes lit up like she had discovered gold. I should have known right then that trouble was brewing, but I just waved politely and went back inside to finish my coffee. The shop vac had been dead for 3 years. The motor burned out after I tried to vacuum up wet cement dust for my garage renovation project. I kept it around thinking maybe I would fix it someday, but that day never came. When my wife Sarah finally convinced me to clean out the garage last weekend, the broken vac was the first thing to go. I even put a sign on it that said "Free Broken." Does not work in big black letters. You would think that would be clear enough for anyone with basic reading comprehension skills. By noon that same day, the shop vac had vanished from the curb. I figured some scrap metal collector had grabbed it for parts. Good riddance, I thought, and went about my day working for my home office. I run a small accounting firm for my house, which Margaret has always seemed to resent. She once tried to cite me for running an illegal business because a client parked in front of her house for 15 minutes. The citation was thrown out, of course, but she never forgot what she called my flagrant disregard for residential zoning. 3 days later, I was watering my front lawn when Margaret came storming across the street. Her face was red as a tomato, and she was dragging the shop vac behind her like an angry toddler with a broken toy. She shouted so loud that neighbors started, peeking out their windows. "You gave me defective equipment," she screamed. "This thing does not work at all." I tried to use it to clean the HOA clubhouse, and it just made horrible noises and started smoking. I stood there with my garden hose, still running, water pooling around my feet, trying to process what was happening. "Margaret," I said slowly, "that vacuum was in the trash. It had a sign that said, 'Broken.' Why would you take it?" She huffed and crossed her arms. "Items placed on the curb are community property according to Section 12(4) of our HOA bylaws. As president, I have first rights to any items that could benefit our community spaces. This vacuum was supposed to help maintain our clubhouse, but you deliberately sabotaged HOA property." The mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion were Olympic level. I pointed out that the sign literally said the vacuum was broken. She claimed the sign was added after she took it, which was impossible since my doorbell camera recorded her taking it with the sign clearly visible. But Margaret was not interested in facts or logic. She demanded I either fix the vacuum immediately or pay for a new one for the clubhouse. I refused, naturally. The next morning, I found an official HOA violation notice taped to my front door. The charges were extensive and ridiculous. Improper disposal of hazardous equipment, creating an attractive nuisance, attempted destruction of HOA property, and my personal favorite, malicious intent to harm community wellness. The fine was $500, and I had 7 days to respond before additional penalties would be assessed. I immediately called my lawyer friend, Dennis Patterson, who laughed so hard when I read him the charges that he had to put me on hold to catch his breath. He told me to document everything and request a formal hearing. He also suggested I file a counter-complaint for theft since Margaret admitted to taking my property without permission. The fact that it was trash did not give her the right to trespass and remove items from my property line. The HOA hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the clubhouse. I arrived early with a folder full of documentation, including photos of the broken vacuum with its warning sign, doorbell camera footage of Margaret taking it, and repair estimates from 3 years ago showing the motor was completely fried. Margaret showed up with what she called evidence of my conspiracy to undermine her authority. Her evidence consisted of printed screenshots from our neighborhood Facebook group, where I had liked a comment that said Margaret was being ridiculous about lawn ornament restrictions. She also presented a theory that I had intentionally left the broken vacuum out, knowing she would take it as part of an elaborate plan to embarrass her. The other board members, David Garrison and Janet Sullivan, looked increasingly uncomfortable as Margaret ranted about my calculated attack on her leadership. When it was my turn to speak, I simply presented the facts. The vacuum had been broken for 3 years. I had disposed of it properly during bulk trash pickup week. Margaret had taken it without permission despite clear labeling that it was broken. I had never encouraged her to take it or implied it was functional. David asked Margaret directly if she had seen the broken sign when she took the vacuum. She stammered and said the sign must have blown away and been replaced later. I pulled up the doorbell footage on my phone and passed it around. The timestamp showed Margaret at 10:47 a.m. examining the sign, taking a photo of it with her phone, and then dragging the vacuum away. Anyway, Janet gasped and asked Margaret why she would take something clearly marked as broken. Margaret's face went from red to purple as she insisted she thought I was lying about it being broken to keep the good equipment for myself. The meeting devolved into chaos when Margaret accused the other board members of conspiring with me against her. She claimed David had always been jealous of her leadership, and Janet was too naive to see my manipulation. David, who had been on the board for 15 years, calmly pointed out that taking items from residents' trash without permission could be considered theft, and using her position as HOA president to retaliate against me was an abuse of power. Margaret then made the mistake that would seal her fate. She announced that as president, she had executive authority to override the board and find me anyway. She pulled out her phone and started typing what she called an emergency executive order. Janet reminded her that our HOA bylaws required unanimous board approval for fines over $100 and that presidential executive orders were not a real thing in our homeowners association. Dennis had advised me to let Margaret dig her own hole, and she was doing a spectacular job. She declared that if the board would not support her, she would call an emergency meeting of all homeowners to vote on my punishment. David pointed out that emergency meetings required 30 days' notice unless there was actual property damage or safety concerns. A broken shop V that she had stolen did not qualify. The next part happened so fast it felt like a movie. Margaret grabbed the broken shop, which he had brought as evidence, and threw it against the wall while screaming that I had ruined everything. The plastic housing shattered, and decades of accumulated dirt and debris exploded across the clubhouse meeting room. Everyone sat in stunned silence as Margaret stood there covered in gray dust, breathing heavily. Janet was the first to speak. She made a motion to remove Margaret as HOA president for conduct detrimental to the community. David seconded immediately. The vote was 2-1 with Margaret voting against her own removal. According to our bylaws, she had 5 days to appeal to the general membership, which would require signatures from 25% of homeowners supporting her continued presidency. Margaret spent the next 5 days going door to door with a petition. Most people pretended not to be home. Others politely declined to sign. Harold Morrison actually laughed in her face and told her the shop vac story was the funniest thing he had heard all year. By the deadline, she had collected exactly 3 signatures, including her own, her sister, who lived 2 streets over, and confused elderly Mrs. Applegate, who thought she was signing for a package delivery. The removal became official at the next regular board meeting. Margaret had to surrender her keys to the clubhouse and her presidential parking sign. The rail kicker came when the board voted to bill her for the professional cleaning required. After her shop vac explosion, the cleaning service charged $850 to properly clean and sanitize the meeting room. But Margaret was not done making poor choices. She tried to sue me in small claims court for intentional infliction of emotional distress. She represented herself, which was a mistake. When the judge asked for evidence that I had intentionally caused her distress, she presented the broken shop V as Exhibit A. The judge asked why she had taken broken equipment from someone's trash. She said it was her right as HOA president. The judge informed her that HOA presidents do not have special trash-picking privileges. The case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could not refile it. The judge also ordered her to pay my court costs of $225. But the best part came when the judge recognized her name. Turns out Margaret had been in his courtroom 6 months, earlier suing her neighbor over a fence dispute, and had been equally unreasonable. Then he suggested she consider whether litigation was the best way to resolve neighborhood disagreements. Word of the court case spread through the neighborhood, like wildfire. Someone created a meme of Margaret dragging the shop vac with the caption "Margaret Peaton trash collector and chief" that got shared in the neighborhood group chat dozens of times. Her reputation was thoroughly destroyed. The final blow came when her employer, a local real estate agency, suggested she take a leave of absence after clients started asking if she was the crazy shop vac lady from Pine Valley Estates. 3 weeks after her removal as president, Margaret listed her house for sale. The for sale sign went up on a Monday morning, and by that afternoon, someone had taped a sign to it that said, "Shop vac not included." She had multiple offers, but ended up taking one that was $20,000 under asking price just to get out quickly. At the closing, the new owners asked if there was anything they should know about the neighborhood. Margaret reportedly said only to never put anything on the curb unless you mean it. The new board president, David, instituted what became known as the Peaton Rule. All items taken from residents' curbs must be returned within 24 hours if found to be non-functional. We also voted to purchase an actual vacuum for the clubhouse using some of the cleaning fee Margaret had to pay. We bought the exact same model of shop vac I had thrown away, but a working version. David put a plaque on it that reads in memory of Margaret's presidency. May it rest in pieces. I still have the broken Shop V vac pieces in my garage. Sarah wants me to throw them away, but I keep them as a reminder that sometimes the trash takes itself out. Last week, I got a Christmas card from Margaret's sister saying Margaret had joined an HOA board in her new neighborhood in Riverside County and was already trying to pass new regulations about trash placement. Some people never learn. The security. Footage of Margaret taking my shop vac has become legendary in our neighborhood. During our annual HOA meeting last month, someone suggested we make it into a training video for new board members on what not to do. The motion passed unanimously. We titled it The Peaton President, A Cautionary Tale of Power and Broken Appliances. Janet had it professionally edited with dramatic music and everything. Margaret's total financial damage from the shop vac incident included $850 for cleaning, $225 for court costs, the $20,000 loss on her house sale, and who knows how much in lost income from her forced leave of absence. All because she could not resist taking a clearly broken vacuum from my curb. The judge's dismissal with prejudice meant she was permanently barred from suing me over this matter. When the clerk read that part, Margaret's jaw dropped and she whispered $1,500 in fines and legal fees for a broken vacuum before storming out of the courtroom.